Hi, Dr. Shook here, and this is our 5th tip for how to prevent hair loss with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. So remember, this is a 7-part video series. This is tip number 5, and this one's a biggie because I could actually break this one into 3 different things, but they're so closely related and so intimately connected that I don't want to talk about them separately. So we're just going to call this tip number 5, okay? So what we're going to talk about here is blood sugar, cortisol, and your sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Okay? These are all intimately connected. If you are a woman and you're having hormonal problems, you've got to look at your adrenal glands and you've got to look at your blood sugar. Okay? And so if you have blood sugar problems, what contributes to that? Because it's not just diet and exercise. Blood sugar, we commonly find there are several things that affect blood sugar. Okay, so let's get into this. We're going to talk, when we start talking about things like blood sugar and cortisol and your sex hormones, there are things that affect them. So for us to have an effective and efficient conversation that actually considers the drivers of the problems, we have to talk about the things that can throw off blood sugar, that can throw off your cortisol, your stress hormone cortisol, and that can throw off your sex hormones, okay, your testosterone and estrogen. So that's what we're going to do. That's why this one could be, a number of different things, but I think we need to talk about them together because they kind of are in the under the the same, they're influenced by a lot of the same things. Okay, so there are 3 things that I see that often cause blood sugar problems. That is, those are high levels of inflammation, number 1. Okay, number 2, high cortisol levels. Okay, and then number 3, xenoestrogens. Okay, these things called obesogens. These plastics, basically. Okay, they're things that are environmental chemicals. Those are the 3 things that I see very frequently influence blood sugar. Now, the thing that's really important here is, blood sugar, what it does is it makes your body less sensitive to your hormones. And so insulin is one of your hormones. You don't want to be less sensitive to your insulin because your insulin lowers your blood sugar. And what we really want to do is we want to keep the blood sugar steady and insulin low, because when insulin spikes and blood sugar spikes, it drives an inflammatory process. The inflammatory process itself can cause a spike in your cortisol, your stress hormone cortisol. And cortisol and the inflammatory process together, they can break down tight junctions or basically lead to intestinal permeability and leaky gut. So blood sugar is so important. Now, when cortisol spikes, it has this very strong influence on your sex hormones, because cortisol, when we talk about adrenal hormones and your sex hormones, they're dependent upon, well, put it this way: if your body will preferentially make cortisol, it will make the cortisol, your stress hormone, over your sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen. And if you're under stress or you have high levels of inflammation, it will create a stress response. And your body will actually take hormones, like there's a hormone called pregnenolone, okay? And it will take it and it will make cortisol before it makes your testosterone and your estrogen. So, and your testosterone and estrogen, it requires pregnenolone, okay? So if your body is stealing pregnenolone from your testosterone and estrogen, then you could be deficient there. And that's called a pregnenolone steal, okay? So those things are really important. They're important because the cortisol is relevant. It affects blood sugar. The inflammatory issues are very relevant as well, because these things drive inflammatory processes. They can break down the tight junctions in the GI tract, and they can drive this inflammatory process. And we talked about in other videos, remember, we talked about blood flow in tip number 2, and I talked about how inflammation can actually decrease blood flow, right, because of this thing called the endothelial nitric oxide system that influences blood flow. And I said inflammation, these inflammatory chemicals, can dampen it and decrease it. So we don't want inflammation. And so what I'm talking about to you guys right now is how blood sugar can drive inflammation, how cortisol can break down like the tight junctions in the GI tract and promote leaky gut, which can drive inflammation and autoimmune response. And then these plastics, the interesting thing, man, these plastics are very, very nasty. These environmental chemicals are becoming much bigger issues. So what we see with those is that things like BPA, right? So that's a plastic. It's in the plastic bottles. Bisphenol A. It's been shown in research to contribute to insulin resistance, and that's a really big problem, because remember, insulin resistance is where your body cannot it's not sensitive to the insulin, and the insulin stimulates your cells to pull blood sugar out of the bloodstream so that your blood sugar comes down. If you're resistant to the insulin, then the blood sugar stays high and your insulin builds up. Insulin's inflammatory, insulin's a growth hormone. It creates a lot of problems. And see, these plastics have also been the term has been coined obesogens, or they've been called obesogens, things that promote and mimic estrogens. That's right, these plastics actually can mimic estrogens. They're called xenoestrogens. And that is just terrible because we know that excessive estrogens can trigger cancers and tissue growth. We know that when you see more of an estrogen dominance in men, it creates like the gynecomastia, where they start to develop more feminine shape and characteristics in their breasts. And this is something that is really, really important. And we know that these plastics, they can affect blood sugar, right? Which we've already talked about how that affects inflammatory processes. It drives inflammation, and they're linked to cancer. So it's really, really important that we consider these things. And we know that blood sugar, so I already kind of told you guys some of the things that blood sugar does. When it spikes, it can drive inflammatory processes, cortisol, and that can break down the gut wall. And all these things can already influence blood flow. But I want to share with you two other things that these spikes in blood sugar can do. So one of the things is that it causes more, when this happens, it causes more of your T4. Now, if you don't remember, T4 is your primary thyroid hormone that's made, but it has to convert it into T3, which is the physiologically more active form, and it's what your cells primarily use. So when your blood sugar spikes and it's higher, it can actually cause your T4 to not convert straight into T3. It can actually cause it to shunt and convert more into reverse T3, which is inactive, primarily inactive. And that reverse T3 can compete with the stuff you want, with the T3, for a spot on the receptor of the cell, and that can cause you to not get the benefit from your thyroid hormone. So it can cause this disconversion or this overconversion into reverse T3. So this is one of the reasons, when we order thyroid labs, I like to see all these things. So that's one of the things it can do. Another thing that it can do is this really interesting thing. It can actually cause the promotion it can cause you to it can cause this enzyme. Okay, it can cause an enzyme to become more active and cause you to produce a form of testosterone in women. And it also in men, but in women, that's associated with male pattern baldness. So listen, that is the last thing I know that you women want. Men don't want it either, but it's a lot easier and socially more acceptable for a man to lose their hair than a woman, and I know that. So here's the thing: this is it's called 5-alpha reductase. Okay, so these fluctuations in blood sugar can cause an upregulation in 5-alpha reductase, which will cause you to produce a testosterone that's 5-alpha DHT or 5-alpha dihydroxytestosterone. Okay, this is associated with male pattern baldness. So one of the things that I do in my office is we very frequently, we're always looking at blood sugar and a lot of these things and cortisol. But oftentimes we'll get a male and female sex hormone pattern that shows us a lot of these different metabolites of your levels of your testosterone, your estrogen. It shows us if you're producing these high 5-alpha DHT metabolites that could be contributing to male pattern baldness. If so, that gives us information so we can say, okay, we need to do something about this overactivity of the 5-alpha reductase enzyme that's causing this potent testosterone that's contributing to you to lose hair in a male pattern baldness pattern. So if you see thinning across the entire top, that's a very realistic possibility. So we got to address that. Now, these are really, really important things. You see, that's why I'm talking about them all together. The hormones, the cortisol, blood sugar, how they all affect inflammation, how they all affect blood flow, how they cause all these problems. So it gets kind of complex. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to test to determine what's driving these processes. Because there's so many variables, how do we know what to do if we don't investigate the drivers? Okay, so I just wanted to share with you guys. This is a really, I think these are fascinating, right? This is tip number 5 on how to prevent hair loss with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, and this is remember a 7-part video series. If you're interested in getting more of this information, I put together a 28-page guidebook where I go through this stuff in great detail. I show you the tests that we commonly do, and if you're interested in getting that, you just click on the link as soon as this video is over. You click on a link, and it will take you to our website where you can actually purchase a copy of that 28-page guidebook for only $7. And we just ask you to do that to help us cover the cost of the technology, because we have that on a website. There's actually a membership site you get access to that you go in and you get your guidebook. There are videos. There's tons of links inside that guidebook that will take you to some of the research, and it's just really a phenomenal resource that I tried to put together to help you guys, because this is one of the biggest questions that I get. So I hope this has been really informative. I appreciate you guys taking time from your day to learn more about your health, and I really appreciate you coming to my website and to listen to me, to help me, to listen to me teach this information. So I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. If you need anything from us, just let us know. Thanks.